Welcome back to Red Player One Reviews. Today I'm going to be taking a look at a game called Quadropolis. In Quadropolis, 2 to 4 players will be acting as mayors of their respective cities and will be using architects to place different types of buildings throughout their cities. These buildings range from factories to parks and score in a variety of different ways. This game is very easy to learn and plays in about 45 minutes. So first, let's take a look at the setup and the gameplay, and then I'll go straight to my final thoughts. Thanks for watching. The game is played over 4 nearly identical rounds. In each round, 25 tiles are placed into the bag and randomly placed onto the board. The tiles are numbered on the back, indicating which round they're used for. Piles of inhabitants and energy units are placed next to the board. These are gained when tiles are drafted and built into a player's city. What you're looking at is the setup for a 4-player game, where all tiles are face up. In 2- and 3-player games, some would remain face down, limiting options for the players. You'll notice a couple of things on each tile. First, in the bottom right-hand corner is what this tile needs to contain in order to have it activated by the end of the game. At the end of the game, the activated tiles are the ones that will score. If this tile, for example, does not have an inhabitant on it by the end of the game, it will not score. In the upper left-hand corner is what this tile provides the player when it's placed into the player's city. In this case, 2 energy units would be provided. They can be used to activate other buildings in the city. Some tiles have victory points here instead of resources, and you would gain victory points at the end of the game. Also, there's one tile that contains the first player marker. That means in the next round, that player would be the first player. In the classic game, there are 6 different types of tiles that score in 6 very different types of ways. First, there are tower blocks, which score for stacks of multiple tower tiles. A stack of just 1 is 1 point, but a stack of 4 is 10 points. Parks will score for adjacent tower blocks. So a park that's adjacent to just 1 tower will score you 2 points, but a park that's adjacent to 4 towers would score 11 points. Shops score for the number of inhabitants that they contain at the end of the game. If a shop has just 1 inhabitant, it's worth just 1 point, but 4 would score 7 points. Harbors score for the longest row of harbors and the longest column of harbors in your city. So a row of just 2 would score 3 points, but a row of 4 would score 12. Factories score 3 points for each adjacent harbor and 2 for each adjacent shop. And finally, public services score a multiplier for how many quadrants they can occupy in your city. So again, your city is split into 4 different sections, and if all 4 contain a public service, you'll score 14 points. But if, for example, only 2 contain public services, that's only 5 points. Each player has their own player mat where they will be placing their city tiles. As you can see, there are 4 quadrants that I mentioned a second ago. The players are also provided with 4 architects numbered 1 through 4. The players will be using these architects to draft tiles from the main board once per turn. So let's take a look at the gameplay. Each of the 4 rounds will consist of each player taking 4 actions in turn order. They will have to use each one of their architects 1 time. First, the player drafts the tile using an architect by placing it around the edge of the main game board where there isn't already an architect. So I could place my number 2 here. That would indicate that I want to grab this harbor tile, and I would have to immediately place the urbanist here. That indicates that the next player to play cannot place their architect such that it points at the urbanist. So they couldn't place here, here, or here the next turn. Now I took this tile with the number 2. This means a couple of things. First, I have to build it into the 2 row or the 2 column of my city. So maybe I want to place it right here. That's a legal move. I would immediately collect the resources in the upper left-hand corner, which in this case is an inhabitant and an energy unit. And then I could immediately activate this tile with the inhabitant. That means at the end of the game, this tile will now score. I can redistribute those resources at any time during the game to make sure that I'm most optimally scoring my buildings. On my next turn, more architect slots have been taken by the other players, leaving me with fewer options. I'm going to place this number 3 architect here, taking another harbor. So again, I would move the urbanist there, and I would have to place this tile on a number 3 in my city. In this case, I'm going to place it right there. That extends that harbor row, which would then score more points at the end of the game. I don't have another inhabitant to occupy this tile right now, so I'll have to gain more later in order to activate. In this example, on my third turn, I choose to place my number 4 architect here, and I do that for a couple of reasons. First, I really want this tower tile that provides 3 inhabitants when placed into my city. So I can place that there and activate it with the energy unit that I'd taken on my previous turn. The other reason that I wanted to take that tile is that I see a number of options are still available for my number 1 architect, so I'll probably still have good options for my 4th and final turn. It's wise to look forward and see what the board state is so you don't back yourself into a corner. If you're late in the turn order, sometimes you'll actually lose out on an action because there's no valid placement for your last architect. So I have plenty of spaces for my number 1 architect. On my final turn, I'll use my number 1 architect to take another tower. So there's a tower I can take here. If I didn't want to do that, there would be 2 shops available, a factory, and a park. But since I built a tower on my third turn, I may want to take another tower because this is with the number 1, and since this is in the number 1 column, I can stack these towers, and I don't need to activate with another energy unit. You only activate with according to the top tile on the stack. I do, however, get 2 more inhabitants, one of which I can immediately place on the harbor that I collected in my second turn. After the other players take their final actions, the round is over. We play through 4 rounds, and then final scoring is applied. Let's jump ahead and take a look at what the final scoring is for my city. So here's my city at the end of the game. Let's start with the towers. So I have a stack of 3 and a stack of 2, which is worth a total of 9 points. My park is worth 2 points because it only has 1 adjacent tower. My public services are only worth a total of 5 because I only have 2. My factory is also worth 5 because it's next to 1 harbor and 1 shop. Then my harbors, where I have a row of 3 and a column of 3, are worth a total of 14 points. And then on this shop, I have 4 inhabitants scoring 7 points, and on this one 3 scoring 4 points for a total of 11. Additionally, these 2 tiles each provide me 2 victory points. My park was able to absorb 1 of my leftover energy units, but I still have 2 left over, which means I'm going to lose 2 points. So in this example, I score a total of 48 victory points. So there you have it. That's Quadropolis. This is a really good game for families or gamers looking for a lighter game. One of the strategic elements I really like in this game is the turn order. So if you're later in turn order, you may have limited options and have to use your architects a little more wisely than other players. You saw in the example that I showed you earlier that I had my number 1 and my number 4 architects left over. But I noticed that if I use my number 1 architect first and then my number 4, I might not have any options left to place that number 4. So there's an element of seeing which of your architects might be more strategic at a given time. And you may look around and see what architects other players have left to see what they might do on their turns. This is a very easy game to teach and learn, and can probably be taught in about 5 or 10 minutes. Even if I lose the game, I feel like I had a really good time being mayor of my city and scoring victory points in some really crucial ways, even if other players did it more efficiently. Gamers looking for a more strategic experience can use the expert game. This uses larger player boards, which have 5 districts instead of 4, and there are 5 game rounds instead of 4. There are also 2 new building types, monuments and office towers. The office towers also stack just like the tower blocks, but the architect that you use has to correspond to the number in the stack of the tile that you're placing, so it's a little bit more strategic. The monuments also score for proximity, so I think they get pluses for tower blocks and parks, but minuses for factories and I think harbors, things like that. So there's also strategy in the proximity there as well. I'm really glad to have this game in my collection. I rated it an 8 out of 10, and you should definitely give it a try. Thanks for watching.